I would just use one word to help kind of hone everything into focus, right? That is just conviction. You just need to understand that the whole startup iteration process, getting to a PMF, is 9 no's before a yes. Your perseverance and your mental capacity gets tested almost every single day. For those that are familiar with Indian cooking, it's like pressure cooker, right? You're inside a pressure cooker the entire time. You will have to do everything. It's not uncommon to see a founder be the CEO, the product person, the actual builder, the go-to-market person, the solution architect, the POC person, the deployment person, and everything in between. So you just need to be ready for a whole world of I don't know.
If you take one day at a time, it's tough. But I think what makes it even more tough is that you have to do it for years and years.
And you log into your bank account and see that nothing is flowing in. That's the real test of your conviction.
Hey, Ramesh, really awesome to have you with us. You've had a really impressive journey, founded 2 companies, sold them to some of the biggest security giants, and you're, one of the founders who really helps other founders like myself.
Thank you.
Grow. Would really love to know about your journey thus far, what you've built, what have been your learnings, and where are you at now?
Absolutely. No, thanks for having me here, Shruti. It's been a great journey, but along the journey, so many folks have helped me, founders and other folks, and so after the second startup, I said like I have to give back and see how we can help the overall startup community. So happy to be helping in any way.
Awesome. So tell us more about your journey. You've had 2 really successful companies. What did you guys do? And who did you exit to?
Absolutely, yeah. So to flash back to 2012, I was a no-name product manager out in a networking company called Juniper. And of course, being in the Silicon Valley, you have to try your hand at a startup. You have to check that off at a minimum. But interestingly, we were seeing some common patterns in enterprise connectivity, and then said, hey, you know what? Like a lot of focus was in the data center. The wide area infrastructure is not seeing as much love. So we started a company, Viptela. And while everybody was flocking towards innovations in the data center, we were pointing it in a completely different direction. Fortunately, the economics of it worked out well on the wide area, and soon networking became networking plus security. And then that was roughly the advent of cloud and SaaS and so forth. And so enterprises were really struggling with connectivity and security. So we were fortunate to be at the right place at the right time with the right technology and help build the overall company from basically like 2-3 people in a garage to about 200 people at the time of acquisition. Lots of interesting large enterprises. Then we got acquired into Cisco. This was in 2017. And then I was there for about 18 months or so, growing the business that they had recently acquired. Once a startup guy, always a startup guy. So you have some bugs that keep biting you multiple times. And so my co-founder and I, we quit from there and then started a second one. This was exclusively inside the public cloud. So we saw some white space in how the hyperscalers were approaching connectivity and security from a data plane networking and security standpoint. And we said, okay, enterprises are struggling with like one common homogeneous layer that goes across public clouds and private and hybrid and all the good stuff there. And we started a company called Prosimo in that space. And we saw amazing traction there. And earlier this year, we sold that to one of the large companies, Palo Alto as well. So good traction, good journey so far. But less, I would say, about a startup journey, more about kind of what you learn along the way, right? Like you find out first and foremost what you're made out of, which is what I would tell every founder in the very first conversation. That's what I ask, right? Like you probably discovered maybe 10-20% of who you are, and you go through a startup journey, you really find out who you are, and for the better, actually, right? And so that has a good bleeding impact also into your personal life. Your signal to noise ratio meter is really well tuned, and so that really helps you cut through noise and figure out like what is really signal. So lots of good learnings. We'll unpack a few as well today.
Awesome. So you went from the route of being a practitioner to starting your own company. And this is a trend I'm hearing from GRC leaders a lot, where they feel, doing the typical GRC role, maybe really inundated, and they're really wanting to do something innovative, step out of an operator role and start a company. So, how did you make a decision? You may have certain personal stuff going on as well, right? Need a certain salary, need
Yeah,
work life balance, etc., etc. And then jumping into being a startup founder the first time can be really daunting. So, how did you make the decision, and what's the framework you would advise folks starting a company for the first time to really think about, to decide whether they're ready for this or not?
absolutely. Yeah. So great question, right? And there's one that many initial first-time founders grapple with as well. I would just use one word to help kind of hone everything into focus, right? One, and that is just conviction. So at the end of the day, you should have conviction in what you're trying to do, and we'll unpack that a little bit. And that conviction has to be formed over a period of time. Either it's a hunch that through data points and reinforcement has turned into a really good conviction, or it is like you have enough momentum you're already seeing and that turns into conviction. But I would say it's less about the idea. Ideas, I know many people will hate me for saying this, ideas are dime a dozen. Execution matters. And as you know, Shruti, in a startup journey, your your perseverance and your mental capacity gets tested almost every single day. And what helps you go through all of that is the conviction. And so, first thing I would say is folks need to, if anybody's serious about starting a company, needs to have a conviction. And that conviction is usually grounded in a few facts, right? The way I like to approach this is gravity. So if you can be Superman, Superwoman, and try to change an entire industry on its head, but those are relatively few in number. I mean, vast majority of them tend to be, I wouldn't call them incremental innovations, but incremental disruptions. And so, first off, you have to look at gravity. So if what you are proposing and the idea that's in your head ruminating and marinating, will that evolve even you without you doing anything? And if the answer is a strong yes, then I think you should be the one to accelerate that transformation, right? That's the best way I would say to describe how you can get to that conviction, because you can get enamored by a few things, right? And especially off late, we have seen people get enamored by, I want to be a CEO founder because it's a cool title, right? Like, come on, you don't know what you're signing up for. So, and many others like that, right? You have, I've been stagnant in a large company, and I feel many of my friends are starting something, so I need to start something. And I wouldn't say bad ideas, but that does not necessarily scream conviction. And so the conviction has to be based on, are you willing to give it a few years, and put yourself through a lot of pain and through a lot of exhilarating moments in order to come out on the other end with a successful product that delights customers, right? And that's really what it comes down to. So for those folks that are looking, and your customers are looking at starting, I would say vast difference between doing something that you want for yourself or your company wants versus creating a product that can go delight other customers, right? I think that bridge is a big bridge. And it isn't a single bridge; it has multiple chasms in the middle as well. So, but I'll come back to conviction, right? So, gravity. Look for gravity. Look for, if you don't do this, will this happen? So let's say it may just take longer. If it's going to take 5 years to get there, can you be the one to drive the transformation in 2 years? Right? If so, then you have something and latch onto it and then drive that forward. That would be kind of like one key things. There are many others that go into that, but yeah, I would say hinge on conviction.
So there's a very big difference in believing that something is a pain point that needs to be solved versus living it every day and going through the pain, as you said, right? What are some practical examples of what people should be ready for?
First test I would say is, your idea run it by a friendly. a friendly prospect, right? So we're talking about customers and prospects here. So run it by a friendly prospect and say, hey, does this idea have merit? And that will help you kind of trim what is a square piece of stone into something a little bit round. So at least it can roll. It's not ready to become a wheel just yet, but at least it can roll. Right? Then you take that to somebody that's a little bit cold that you don't know and run that, and you might find that that's not applicable to you at all. It's not applicable to them at all. And so to me, the real test is, can you identify somebody cold that you don't know, that you don't have a prior relationship with, and convince them of the value? Right? That's number one. This day and age, with AI in particular, you have the advantage of getting to a prototype really, really fast. And so, in addition to convincing somebody of the value, you can actually show some of these things in action, right? And one thing I always see is people get so enamored by what they are building. They really build it up, right? And to me, that's not a good test for whether you're ready to take this to somebody and get validation or not. You have to show something half baked that has enough value, and the other half they actually pull you in. That's a very good test for whether what you're providing is highly valuable or not, right? I am not saying I know it's fully highly disruptive, everything is there and it'll get deployed today. No, but the value that somebody sees in what you are building has to be very apparent, that even minus all the bells and whistles, the core of it really, really stands, right? And so that's one thing that I would highly advise. So first is, I would say, identify a cold prospect, run it by them, even show it to them, do multiple of those, get some data points from there. Second is just make sure that that you're able to drive the value without building the whole thing. If those two things don't stand the test of time, you building more on top of it is really not going to happen, right? And so I've just focused on customer value, customer pain, and the pain is probably the one that the founders signals have to really capture well. Nobody comes to you, and you've been through this as well, Shruti. So nobody comes to you and says, this is my problem. You have data points and noisy signals that tell you there is this manifestation of this problem, this manifestation of a different problem. Only the founders really have the ability to kind of put all this in somewhat of a knowledge graph and say, you know what, like the root of all of this is this, and that then becomes the idea and the transformation that you want to drive. And so getting to that is not simple. It requires obviously quite a bit of domain expertise. And if the domain expertise is absent and you're able to build a product, I would say you're probably in the 0.5% of people who can accomplish that. But more so to do with being able to drive to a high degree of conviction, tested by somebody cold, show half baked, but be able to punch on the value, and then more importantly, just are you solving that pain for them, right? If these four things you've not passed the gates through, then you're not ready for a product, right? And not ready for a company. And this is like, I would say, multiple stages even before raising funds. Raising funds comes much later. A very simple philosophy, which is, before you go ask somebody for money and start to raise, just make sure that you are highly convinced that what you're going down is the right path. And then importantly, there are at least an identified handful of people on the other end who say, yes, this looks interesting, it's valuable to me. If you build it, I'll buy, right? And that's the point at which you go to the next stage to see if you want to seek funding and so forth. But until then, it's just it's a grind to get to the root of the problem, right? The root of the problem. So
yeah, I think you have to refine the exact problem a lot. Also refine the way you position it. Yeah, I think as a first time founder, I was not very good at it, where I felt I needed to do a lot of things, versus the reality is that you don't need a lot of quantity, but a lot of quality.
correct.
And, it was hard. So it makes a lot of sense before going all in, validate it with real customers. And I think the one question that made a big difference was, hey, if I were to build it, would you buy it?
Correct.
Because if people like you, then they'll always say, oh, this is a good idea. But it doesn't really signal the reality from a likability. at an individual level.
Exactly. And there are really two gates there, Shruti. You hit the nail on the head, right? There are really two gates there. One is you show something, they say, it looks interesting. And then you say, can you trial it? And when you say trial, it means now I have to kind of immerse this into my existing environment, processes, whatnot. And it's more than me on this call that has to make that decision. I'm involving somebody else and so forth. And so that's kind of the first test. And if the answer to that is a no, then learn from there, right? Like maybe there are friction points there that you need to iron out, or maybe they're just being nice to you and saying yes, right? Then
Yeah.
once they have the product in their hands and play around with it, then the immediate gate after that is just would you pay for it, and the dollar denomination really does not matter. I've seen $1,000 product or a $1 million product get adopted, but the friction points and why people say no are exactly the same. And so
Yeah.
you have to put people through that test. And these are all the moments, once again, where your conviction gets tested. Right? You go pitch it to a cold person. If 5 times in a row you get like, I don't know, this is somewhat okay, they're nice to have, not interesting, then you should ask yourself, do I have the conviction to say, what, I've just not gone to the right people because the idea is sound and I feel the value is there and the pain is there. I just need to find the next 5. And that's like you don't have, there's no hard and fast rules that you can put there to tell whether your hunch is right or not, right? You can go to the next 5 and once again you get 10 no's in a row. What do? You take that at face value and redefine what you're up to, or do you go find the next 5, right? And so for all of that to happen, you need to have the conviction. Second would be, you just need to understand that the whole startup iteration process, getting to a PMF, is nine no's before a yes, right? The no's are not no's because they don't want it. The no's are just objections. The no's are just friction points, and you need to be able to iron those out. Every step along the way, you'll identify a few objections, and you'll kind of build your product accordingly, build your process accordingly, your go to market accordingly, and so forth. So whoever does not have the ability to take like 9 no's in a row, sorry, you're not going to make it, right? And
So, in terms of personal sacrifices or what they should be ready for, because when you're working as a part of an organization, and usually a bigger one, then you don't have to work as hard, right? Like, what should people be ready for? What does a day in the life of a founder look like?
yeah, every day is different. I think that's the only constant, right? The one thing you can count on, it's like no 2 days are going to be alike. Especially early days when you don't have a large team put together. Maybe it's you plus less than a handful. In some cases, it could just be you and maybe one other person. You will have to do everything, right? Like, it's not uncommon to see a founder be the CEO, the product person, the actual builder, the go-to-market person, the solution architect, the POC person, the deployment person, and everything in between. And not to mention taking care of all paperwork and all of the documents and so forth. And so you just need to be ready for a whole world of I don't knows, right? Because you just won't have the crystal ball to know what those look like. And which means that you need to, on one hand, learn. On the other hand, you need to use your judgment to figure out, is this right for me or wrong, right? And so it's like constantly moving and churning environment, but you need to be making high quality decisions. That's very unnerving. That's very unnerving, right? Because what are you trusting at that time? What you learned, or you're trusting your gut? And so, and you can ask 5 people, they'll give you very different opinions, but at the end of the day, you have to make the call. And so those are moments that really test the patience, right? And you have to go through all of that, and then importantly, just keep your head straight, keep your focus on kind of the north star, right? Which is, can I build this? Is this enough value to be a company on its own? There are lots of product ideas, and not every product idea can turn into a company idea. And so for a startup to stand on its own, it has to be way more than just a product. It has to have kind of the whole ecosystem around it as well. And so those are, I would say, some of the initial places where I would say, having dealt with many startups, two of my own and many others that I'm engaged in, the first drop off happens way at the front end where there's not enough conviction. And the first question I ask is, what's the push and the pull? Many times the push is like, I'm so fed up of my role in a big job, in a big company, and so I want to go do something. To me, honestly, it's a big red alarm right there. It's not a push. You need to have enough of a pull, right? Like something is pulling you towards doing this, right? And so that's kind of the first drop off point. And if it's enough push that's driving you to do this, I've seen high probability people drop off after being in this for like a few months. Right? So once you get
Mhm.
past that, then it becomes, are you comfortable? And I've seen many founders, they just immediately get into building mode. And I'm like, oh, that's all great, but like, who have you spoken to? I'm like, oh, I spoke to my friend and my friend's friend and this, that, and yeah. Like, no, those are not data points, right? Those are just initial tidbits of information that you have. Have you pitched this to somebody cold? And what has been the reaction? And you go through that step by step is really when you know whether you're ready for it. And so I, one advice I would offer is people don't quit your job just yet. Um, Go through this process. This is something that you can do in your spare time as long as there's no conflict with your primary company, and go through that. And if you feel you've reached a point where the only thing in between is that it's either your time or capital or the fact that you have some conflict and you need to get out, and that's the only way you can pursue this passion, then that's the right time for you to leave and go. Until then, I would say you can't really delineate between a hobby and an actual idea. And so
Mm.
just be wary
So,
of that.
what are some examples of things that will go wrong and you must be ready for them? For example, couldn't fundraise, employee left, competitor came, screwed up with a customer. Like, what are some examples that, are real life examples of things you'll need to endure through?
Yeah, so great question, right? So the single biggest one is nice to have versus must have, right? So I would say I'll just go in a certain order, not in priority, but I'll go in a certain order, right? To your customers, if you're solving a really compelling must have problem, however small that is, right, then you get a seat at the table. If you're marginally improving something by X percentage, highly likely your incumbent is gonna come there and crush that, right? And so nice to have versus must have, probably the most cliched but most overlooked as well, right? So that's number one. The second one is very few people actually do this by themselves, right? 1% armies are there, but in the enterprise B2B and AI world in particular, very few are a single man shop, right, or a single woman shop. And so, which means you're going to have people around you that you're going to see way more than your spouse, and for probably 12, 16 hours a day for multiple weeks in a row. So personalities come in the way, differences come in the way, and so second biggest drop off is dynamics between people. And so if you can't get along, then tough luck. That's just not going to work, right? Because for those that are familiar with Indian cooking, it's like a pressure cooker, right? You're inside a pressure cooker the entire time. It's about to burst, but like you gotta exist. And so can you handle that? And so I've seen way too many times where the interaction between people kind of drive things out. So that's number two. The third one is really kind of compelling product in, no, I wouldn't call it capabilities, but can it provide the value? And there again, you've seen, hey, it's again, it solves like a part of the problem, but it doesn't solve the rest of it, or it is like you're selling into the wrong people. Things are changing, right? Like especially now, in enterprises in particular, organizations and budgets have a pretty big role to play. And so you might have talked to somebody who's a subject matter expert, but if your user and the enterprise buyer are two different people, then you're stuck. Your cycles are long, and you're stuck there. So again, just trying to cohesively put all this together is a third big area where I see a huge amount of drop off. And when you go through all of this, you land your first customer, that tells you that yes, you have proof, but that still does not tell you that you have repeatability. And so repeatability comes after that by saying, can I find like 10 more of these guys? And the 10 more of those guys now suddenly means you have to really, really trim down. You don't have the luxury of talking to people in depth in order to convince them. You got to be able to capture that very, very quickly, put a whole go to market around this, and be able to like communicate very, very crisply, be able to articulate the value crisply, be able to show the value very crisply, and so forth. So again, multiple gates that you have before you reach essentially PMF, right? And I've seen way too much of drop off right at the beginning, where it's a nice to have, must have. Like that's probably number one. Number two is just kind of people dynamics and not being able to get along and so forth. All the way up to I have the first customer, but I need to search for kind of 10 more in that same bucket. So the thing is, there are no half measures. You have to do this with a certain degree of conviction and with a certain level of ferocity, which means you're going to jump into the pond with 2 feet. And so, are you ready to jump into the pond with 2 feet? Is the question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very interesting thought. So when folks quit and decide, okay, they got the initial validation, how should they decide on what segment to serve? Should it be like SMB, mid-market, enterprise?
Yeah, so this is one where it's a process of experimentation and iteration, right? I would just draw very simple. If it's enterprise, I would just draw three blocks and say, is a SMB, mid market, and large enterprise, and run it by enough people in each of those three cohorts. It's a process of elimination. You'll have a hunch as to which one is number one, which one is number two, but hunch does not equal validity. So you'll have to run the experiments and run the iterations to figure out where is the value the most. This is one again where there is a classic trap of I'm building lots of capabilities and this is appealing to large enterprise. May not be, because the value may be a lot more applicable to mid enterprise. And so just because large enterprise tells you I like this capability and that capability doesn't mean they're going to buy. It might be a bit more appealing to mid enterprise. So the only way to find out is through experimentation. Enough people in each of these cohorts that you talk to, try to move forward. And this again requires a very small team. Usually it's the founder, maybe one tech person along with that founder, and you go through the process of iteration very quickly. And it's a disqualification process. You know what, this is not appealing, this is not appealing. And that gives you a good flavor then for what needs to be built into the product. And I've seen way too many people do it exactly the opposite. They build the product, they have the capabilities, and then they go find the market. It's actually, it works both ways. So you have kind of the bare bones of a product, you take that to different cohorts, you see which one pulls you in the most, and then you have conviction that you develop that is the buyer I want to go after. And as a startup, you don't have the luxury of focusing on three. You can focus on one. Which one are you going to focus on? That will then drive what capabilities that you need in the product even further. Mid-market means easy consumption. Large enterprise means lots of bells and whistles. SMB means completely different ballgame with distribution. And so all those things drive a whole lot of capabilities into the product, all the way from what you show, what you don't show, to how do I consume, to what level of controls do I put around it, to whatnot, right? And so that's why don't build too far until you identify kind of who your primary cohort is, and then build for that cohort. And along the way, of course, if you have enough conviction, you have enough data points, then it'll get refined and refined. But if you don't, then that's a good data point as well, that, hey, what you're building is not right for the audience that you're going after. So those are, again, the whole process of iteration is also a very nerve-wracking one. And go back to conviction. If you don't have the conviction, that iterative process that you go through, you'll probably be 90% of the time down in the dumps.
And is this in the matter of weeks, months, years?
The sooner the better. Weeks is quite. If it happens in weeks, that's good. If it's large enterprise, it doesn't happen in weeks because you hardly get time in front of them. 2 meetings happen 2 weeks apart, and so you're in the weeks plural category right there. Mid-market, maybe you can collapse because the decision making and the user, the buyer, and the decision making is all with one person. So you can probably identify and discover a whole lot. So depending on who you're going after, SMB, you don't do too much of these interviews other than kind of really show them and see if they adopt. And if the answer to that is a no, then tough luck, right? And so yeah, it sometimes takes months to get to a good amount of repeatability, right? And also you're building product along the way. So sometimes you'll build a capability based on what you have learned, so that the next meeting goes really well and you're able to showcase this as value. And you find evidence to the contrary, and you're like, "What was I thinking?" And then you have to go through. So it's a high churn environment, but I wouldn't call it it's a negative spiral. It's more of trimming the edges and making sure that, like, again, a nice block of stone turns out to be something nice and smooth.
How should folks decide whether they should bootstrap or raise money?
Getting capital from other folks essentially puts a lot more pressure on the company. And so if you have not reached the point where you are in this for a few years and you want to be in this for a few years, then don't go raise capital. Capital is available, I think, in many different ways. Some hunt ideas, some hunt people, and whatnot. So raising capital is not the yardstick here. It is, do you have the conviction again, and are you in it for the long term? And if you have decided yes, and you have enough data points, then go and raise capital. I would say a very simple yardstick for raising capital is just like the idea phase, where the gravity is going to pull things in a certain direction and you are helping accelerate that. Just like that, the capital should help you accelerate to get to your milestones. Your milestones should be very clear. You're not creating milestones based on capital. I think I've seen way too many people do that, and it just goes completely haywire. You have very good conviction on what you want to build, who you're building it for. You even have a few people on the other end who are ready to buy. The only thing coming in the way is time. And it's time because it's 2 people right now, but 2 can become 5, and 5 means my 9 months can get shrunk to 3 months or something like that, right? And so that's the right time to be going and raising capital. And again, capital here available in different forms. So if you're doing a friends and family seed and so forth, you have a little more latitude in how you're running the play. If you're going institutional investors, VCs, and so forth, then you have to be ready to be on a certain scale, which means you can't sit on the capital for too long, because capital needs to be deployed and needs to start returning some returns. And at the same time, you don't want to burn through too quickly either. And so you're in a very different ball game once you get institutional investment. But there are ways around it on the front end, at least when you have to raise little with friends and family. And that's the right time, I would say, where you move from kind of bootstrap to raising the initial funds. But to the extent possible, your conviction will get tested when you're bootstrapped. When that dollar that hits your bank very predictably stops, and you log into your bank account and see that nothing is flowing in, that's the real test of your conviction, right? Second test would be at home. Especially if you married and have kids and whatnot, and you're not able to spend the time, you're compromising on quality time. Another big conviction, right? Like, you need to have to wait through all of this. So that's why anybody that's thinking that this is a very interesting endeavor, and it's the push, not the pull, you're in it for a big surprise. So.
Yeah, I remember when I left Microsoft. I knew it was hard, but I thought I had done many hard things in my life. I think Zania has been a really, really tough thing. If you take one day at a time, it's tough. But I think what makes it even more tough is that you have to do it for years and years.
Correct.
And even weekends, nights, like there's pretty much no turning off. So when you have to do it for years and years, that's what makes it even more tough than just having a bad day.
Yeah, and especially when you're having bad time and still want to grind this through, again, you need to have fun while doing it, right? And so that fun comes in the form of just eternal optimism, right? Like, hey, I'm going to crack this. Yes, I got this punch today. I'm going to get up again. We'll have another punch tomorrow, but like eternal optimism says, I'll get there.
So, when folks are looking for design partners, should they be doing free versus paid? How to pitch the first design partners?
Yeah, so it depends on the stage, right, Shruti? So if it is really, really early where you're building product along with people, I would say identify a very small set, right? Like no more than I would say two that are helping you build that product. And then what you offer in return to them is essentially a functional product, and what you're getting back is a lot of good high quality feedback, right? And if that's the case, then even there I would say kind of have a simple gate that says, would you be willing to buy this for even a very nominal amount, right? Outside of those, all other design partners have to also have an element of go to market. What I mean by that is they're not just helping you build because they believe in the product. They have to believe that this is going to be a viable company, which means they need to be shelling out some dollars, only then the company survives as customers, right? And so outside of kind of your very, very front end couple of design partners, all others should be paid engagements. And it's not for anything other than testing out your go to market. Because building product is one thing. You can build lots of capabilities, appeals to the value. Techies in particular will love that. But that's not what makes a company. Companies are made because you can have a product that appeals to the value that somebody is willing to pay for. And the design partners also have to help you with the pay for piece. If not, then I would kind of just limit the initial cohort to be no more than 2 or 3, and then after that, they're not design partners anymore. They're actually commercial engagements that you need to go after. So the subsequent question around that is usually how much should I charge for? There you have a bit more latitude, I would say, right? Like it largely depends on the value. If having that logo on your side gives you bragging rights to go attack multiple others in that same industry, that's valuable. And so it cannot be translated into monetary terms. And so you can be a little more lenient on how much you want to charge them, but do charge them because only then they become a paying customer. But some might just be, hey, you know what, they have enough of a pain and I'm solving a real pain for them. Then I would say put your capitalist hat on and say, I'm going to extract value out of this. And so there again, you have a fair degree of latitude in how much you want to be charging them. But you'll know based on the engagement.
Yeah. Yeah. These are really awesome and thoughtful insights. So, the last question is, if you were to start a company again, what are some tactical things that you do and maybe do differently? So, if you were giving advice to your younger self, what would that playbook look like?
Yeah, so lots has changed in the last year or two, right? And we have to evolve as well. And I say we all the startups and all the founders have to evolve as well, right? Especially in the brave new world of AI. Again, building product, I would say as much as it was hard in the past is not as hard, right? But does that product solve the problem, and is somebody willing to pay for it? Again, are like really two key questions you can have in the front end that gets addressed. So I would say if I were to do something all over again, first thing would be just get to that point of conviction, right? And the point of conviction in the past was I had this, if it's a software product, you have 6 months of differentiation because you've figured out way before anybody else. In this world, I don't think you even have 6 months of differentiation. So which means whatever you're doing has to be somewhat profound that somebody cannot, even if they look at it deeply, cannot copy because of insight, because of whatever, right? You have some unfair advantage. So until you get to that unfair advantage that is unique to you, I would say don't jump into that. Just that's what I would tell myself. That's number one. The second one is again be. I've seen many repeat founders know that, hey, you know what, like I can crack this. I have a process, I have a system, I can crack this. But fundamentals are fundamentals, right? Nice to have problems are nice to have problems. Must have problems are the must have problems. And so just have the same level of rigor in figuring out whether this is a must have problem, how widespread is this problem? Is this problem small enough today that maybe 20 people are losing sleep will become a problem that 2,000 people are going to lose sleep in the near future? All of those things are just fundamental to the starting of a company, right? And then, of course, now you have the advantage of building prototypes. I would like not show decks at all. I would just go have a conversation around problem, value, and use the prototype to discover, right? The discovery part is extremely important, to kind of the initial stages, because you have a few hypotheses, and through the discoveries where you're really kind of either qualifying it in or out. And so you need to, so I would go through all of that, and then before you involve more people and more investment and so forth, just again have the conviction, right? So I wouldn't change that conviction part even one bit, but I would just have a bit more discipline around when we feel you're ready. That's one thing. In the past, again, I've made the mistake of thinking I'm ready and then spend some time figuring things out after, and that does not help anybody, right? Good to do that when you are like 1-2 people, not good to do that when you have even like a handful. So that's one thing I would do differently. Again, coming back to this brave new world of AI, so many things are different, right? In the past, if you just contrast B2B SaaS with AI, B2B SaaS used to be, you had this watering holes. You had kind of SEO that would get you to get you presence, so that people that are searching for what you need can find you. In this case, it's very different. The number of watering holes are not that available in the digital realm. So there are fewer number of watering holes, and you have to be in the right place there, which means SEO doesn't work. You have to be very thoughtful about what people are searching for and how are you appealing to them, right? So that's number one. The second one is it's been shocking actually, is kind of the concept of a POC in the AI world does not exist. And when I say that, I mean, it's called proof of value. It's called kind of validation of the product and so forth. But you're not doing a POC, right? It's not proof of concept anymore. It's like I'm taking your product. I'm going to run this in a small environment, and it's very quickly, if it's in, converts into a paid engagement. If it's out, you're out. And so that process means a lot needs to go into the product itself, so that you're ready for something like that. So you have a quick time to articulate value and capture and make it sticky, and that stickiness then should drive into expansion. Right? Land is not useful alone anymore, and so land to expand is really where the value capture happens. And so those are all very interesting things, and the churn as well, right? You used to, in the B2B SaaS world, you could put CSMs and a whole bunch of people to make sure that your customers don't churn, and you keep them happy. In this case, like most customers are validating 3 solutions in parallel, and the switching cost is fairly low, and so when you're not sticky enough, then you should expect a high degree of churn as well, right? And so all those things, back to your learnings, all those things now need to go into the front end of defining and designing a product as well. So those are some of the things that I would do slightly differently this time around. And nobody has a playbook, fortunately or unfortunately, and so people are writing one as they go.
Awesome. Yeah, this was a really useful episode. You gave us a lot of very insightful tactical tips on how to think about building a company the first time and how to go about executing it. Thank you so much, Ramesh,
Absolutely.
for chatting with us.
Happy to share my experiences, and thanks for keeping it entertaining as well, Shruti.
Awesome.